listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back to the second hour of Dave and Mackie's Shiny Side Out, show number 484, which is awesome. And we're going to talk about the fiat currency and fractional reserve lending system and the parasites that create it, inhabit, and perpetuate it. That's right, parasites. No longer the elite. We need to call them what they are, parasites. They're really nasty kind that you just want to, grind under your heel or, pick out from behind your ear or wherever you have them. Parasites. I don't like them. If you like them, that's okay. That's up to you. And
wherever you have your ones.
Wherever you have your parasites. But where are we? Where were we? So we looked at the history of the banking system. There's a really great resource site that we found. I'm going to share their content with you. Have been for the last couple of weeks. And it's really important to understand just how it all happened. And then I hope that you are now a little bit better informed than maybe before. But it's ultimately really up to us to either change the systems or let them run their course as they are. And now in the past, and this is something we shared with you, people did try to change. They did try to change the system, some with some success and some with less success. And most of the people that earnestly or in earnest tried to change the system were dealt with rather harshly, and most of them were killed. What are you talking about? Well, one of them was in fact Abraham Lincoln, and we shared that with you, and that's probably we're gonna start today. I would think, since sort of closed off the show last week. So let's start with Abraham Lincoln at the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. I mean, I know we finished our show off last time, but it's a good way to start. We're only into the second page of that particular chapter. So essentially, what happened was that Abraham Lincoln ran out of money, all right? But let me take you to the text. With the central bank killed off, fractional reserve banking moved like a virus to numerous state-chartered banks, instead causing the instability this form of economics thrives on. When people lose their homes, someone else wins them for a fraction of their worth. Depression is good news to the lender, but war causes even more debt and dependency than anything else. So if the money changers couldn't have their central bank with a license to print money, a war it would have to be. With Andrew Jackson, remember Andrew Jackson stopped the central bank, and he also felt that it was the biggest success in his political career to stop it. We can see from this quote, which is coming, of the then Chancellor of Germany, that's Otto von Bismarck, that slavery was not the only cause for the American Civil War. So this is Otto von Bismarck, Chancellor of Germany in 1876. The division of the United States into federations of equal force was decided long before the Civil War by the high financial powers of Europe. These bankers were afraid that the US, if they remained as one bloc and as one nation, would attain economic and financial independence, which would upset their financial domination over the world. On the 12th of April, this is now back to the text, so that was the quote, on the 12th of April 1861, this economic war began. Predictably, Lincoln, needing money to finance his war effort, went with the Secretary of the Treasury to New York to apply for the necessary loans. The money changers wishing the Union to fail offered loans at 24 to 36%. Lincoln declined the offer. An old friend of Lincoln's, Colonel Dick Taylor of Chicago, was put in charge of solving the problem of how to finance the war. His solution is recorded as this: just get Congress to pass a bill authorizing this printing of full legal tender treasury notes and pay your soldiers with them, and go ahead and win your war with them also. Colonel Dick Taylor. When Lincoln asked if the people of America would accept the notes, Taylor said the following: the people or anyone else will not have any choice in the matter if you make them full legal tender. They will have the full sanction of the government and be just as good as any money, as Congress is given that express right by the Constitution. Lincoln agreed to this solution and printed $450 million worth of the new bills, using green ink on the back to distinguish them from other notes. Yes, Dave?
Greenbacks.
Said last week? That's the one. Now, this is what Abraham Lincoln had to say about that. The entire thing is fairly long, so bear with me. The government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency and credit needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of consumers. The privilege of creating and issuing money is not only the supreme prerogative of government, but it is the government's greatest creative opportunity. By the adoption of these principles, the long-felt want for a uniform medium will be satisfied. The taxpayers will be saved immense sums of interest, discounts, and exchanges. The financing of all public enterprises, the maintenance of stable government and order progress, and the conduct of the Treasury will become matters of practical administration. The people can and will be furnished with a currency as safe as their own government. Money will cease to be the master and become the servant of humanity. Democracy will rise superior to the money power. Abraham Lincoln. From this, we see that the solution worked so well, Lincoln was seriously considering adopting this emergency measure as a permanent policy. This would have been great for everyone except the money changers, who quickly realized how dangerous this policy would be for them. They wasted no time in expressing their view in the London Times. Oddly enough, while the article seems to have been designed to discourage this creative financial policy, in its put-down, we're clearly able to see the policy's goodness. Now, this is taken from the Hazard Circular, London Times, 1865. And I'm quoting directly. If this mischievous financial policy, which has its origin in North America, shall become endurated down to a fixture, then that government will furnish its own money without cost. It will pay off debts and be without debt. It will have all the money necessary to carry on its commerce. It will become prosperous without precedent in the history of the world. The brains and wealth of all countries will go to North America. That country must be destroyed, or it will destroy every monarchy on the globe. Now let's just pause for a second here, Dave. What just described would be paradise for most people.
Oh, imagine not having debt.
A non-debt currency. So Dave, I don't want to put you on the spot, but what would happen in our current situation if all government debt was paid off? What would happen?
Okay. Prosperity?
No.
What would happen?
There'd be no money. If we paid off all our debts, there would be no money in circulation. So the way it works today, so in the olden days, there was a kilo of gold, and then you could say, okay, this kilo of gold is worth $1,000, and here's $1,000 that is backed by this gold. Okay, so it was a commodity currency. It was backed by something real that people valued. Fair enough, right? These days, our currency is a debt currency. Okay, a debt currency means exactly that. Our government decides, ooh, I need $100 billion, Dave. Dave, go and print me $100 billion paper pieces that say, I owe $100 billion.
Okay.
And Dave will go, yes. Thank you, Dave.
Sure.
Thank you. So here I have it, my stack of paper, and I go to the central bank, which is normally a privately owned banking institution. I say, oh, Mr. Bankman, here's a stack of papers that says I owe $100 billion. I will call them bonds. These are called bonds. They will put me in bondage to you. I owe you $100 billion. But now I need you to issue my currency for me, please. Please print $100 billion. And then the central bank goes, yes, not a problem. Here you go. There you go, $100 billion. Where did it come from?
Look, what's that over there?
Right? What? So if ever the governments of the world were to pay off their debts, because every government pretty much in the world these days is based on the system, there would be no money in circulation. There would be no money in circulation. People really have a hard time understanding these concepts, Dave, because it is so alien to our intuitive understanding of wealth and wealth creation. If you accumulate like millions and millions of dollars, you think you're rich. No, all you have done is you accumulated a whole bunch of debt. that the government has entered into on your behalf. Thank you very much. Okay? And nobody in the chat room just told me you should get the kids to start my car. There's an interesting story there. Now, I don't know if you want to share this, Dave.
Oh, I'll share it. I'll share it.
Now would be the time, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I've been waiting for this hour so I can share it. So after last week's show, where my car worked perfectly, the next morning there was no brake fluid at all in the car. None. My foot went straight to the floor, and it cost me hundreds of dollars, like nearly $500-600 to get that, get the master cylinder replaced, and it re-oiled up, or and so that it could be operational again. But the mechanic goes, "Where did all your fluid go?" I said, "I don't know. It was there like a week ago." And he goes, "Well, it couldn't be possible that would happen. How did you even stop the car? Because my car's on a hill, and it's it's awful." And I said, "Oh, I did a show about banks on the weekend," and I laughed. And my kids have to start the car in the morning, and he goes, "Well, are you going to keep talking about them? Because I'll see you next week, right?" He thought it was hilarious. No. He thought I was joking.
Yeah,
I'm not joking.
See, that's the thing, right? Sorry, look, this is serious stuff, guys. Right now, I'm not saying either way. I'm just.
I love the banks, Mickey.
Yeah, no, I love.
You're doing this show on your own, buddy.
long live the banks! Hooray! I greet my masters in bonditude.
The monetary system is perfect.
I like the human touch, Dave. What I want is, there's a question here that was raised in the chat room by Flippy. What if we found a quadrillion, dollars in gold, or marks, or euro, whatever? That's okay.
It means nothing to anyone. That someone would sell it.
So now, if you did find a quadrillion gold, chances are that you would depart from this planet in a rather rapid fashion.
No, you couldn't get off the ground with that much gold in your pocket.
No, you couldn't. Your soul can. But this is the problem, though, right? So if you were to create this independent wealth, as long as you're not a threat to the established wealth, and by the way, this quadrillion in gold doesn't even scratch the parasites' wealth they have accumulated. But you look, chances are, one of two things could happen. If you were to threaten the established order, they would make short work of you, or you don't threaten the established order, you become part of the club and you just live your life in obscene luxury, which is also good. Now, you can do all that. I mean, you can still sell gold, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's not like gold is not valuable. Of course, it is as a commodity. But what we're moving towards, and have been for a long time, is the criminalization of cash. And in effect, we will move to the criminalization of gold as well, right? Now, why is that? Well, because these drug dealers, they use cash from the drug dealers. They have gold and valuables, right? That must be bad. So accumulating real wealth privately will become harder and harder. It's already hard. I mean, if any cash transaction over $10,000 needs to be reported to the police. You can't move currency between countries on you. So if you have more than $10,000 on you, and there's you
must declare it.
You must. That's on any arrival form in any country that I've ever visited. Right? If you've got cash, the values might change, but it's around $10,000 US. That's about where they set it. Now that's real enough, right? Because we're moving now into an era of digital currency. But see, there's a spanner in the works, and that's why I love Bitcoin. And we're going to talk about that toward the end of the show cycle. Because that's exactly where the parasites want to move to, a digital currency, because at that point it no longer matters. It's all credit, and they control it, and they have as much of it as they need, or could ever want.
And you can simply type the numbers in, and it won't affect global currency or global rates, and it would be a global currency anyway, once we go 100% digital.
Correct, and nobody would have any idea of what's going on. No,
that's right.
It's just in the computer, right? Now, but Bitcoin threw a spanner in the works, because Bitcoin did exactly what they wanted to do, only in a completely free and uncontrollable way. Right? So it's just really interesting. Well, Bitcoin is bad. It's just bad. And again,
so Mackie, you're a bank, and you like your banking system. This is what the banking system asks of Bitcoin. So, how do you lend money? And Bitcoin's response is, well, we don't. It's just a thing you can own.
Yes.
And they go, well, where's the profit in it for me?
Yes.
Oh, I just become more valuable, says Bitcoin. Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything. Then where's my money? I want profit. I work by just loaning people money. Where's the interest? Oh, there's no interest on Bitcoin. You don't know. You don't pay interest for having it. No.
Well,
I fail to see the incentive, says the banks.
Yeah.
That's why they would never get on board.
Bingo. And you can't crack it either. It's well, you can, I guess you can, but you shouldn't be able to crack it now. And this is where the ledger system comes in as well. What's it called? Bitcoin is based on it. Dave, what's the word I'm looking for?
Blockchain.
It's blockchain. Thank you. That's it. So without blockchain, Bitcoin wouldn't be possible. And blockchain, in and of itself, as an invention, if you will, a technology advancement, is already threatening the banks and the way we do business, right?
In the future, it'll take half an hour to make a single transaction because the blockchain file would be so large, it would be inconceivably large, and eventually clog the entire internet.
Yeah, that's right.
The people don't realize the short-term transactions, sure, the life of a product, sure, but not for an ongoing currency. It's ridiculous that they use blockchain, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? At one time, it's going to be it'll take the whole of Google's database to store the single blockchain, record in one transaction.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is true. Now, but having said that, though, eventually, what blockchain will do from the smaller transaction point of view, not the larger killer ones, is it will make banks and lawyers obsolete in that space at least. But you need to listen to the rhetoric that's coming out of the media as well when it comes to Bitcoin. And
they play it down?
Well, they do, because it's used by drug dealers, and terrorists and such, just like cash. Drug dealers and terrorists, they use cash. Bitcoin. Drug dealers and terrorists.
That's right.
Only the regular citizens, they should use the banking money, the digital currency that we provide you, at 50% interest. Thank you very much. And again, I've said this before, and I'll say it again before I go back to the.
He's going to say it again here, right now. He's going to say it right now.
I'm really upset, Dave, about two things.
What's that?
And I was too late.
One, and how so?
I had no hand in inventing religion. Two, I had no hand in inventing the banking system, fractional reserve lending, and fiat currency. Those two things really irk me. Because if I had been there at the inception, sweet bananas. Look at me, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Sherman, set the Wayback Machine.
The Wayback Machine. That's because those two things are the longest running cons on this planet. They are, by far. By far. And we have bought into it, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again, hook, line, and sinker.
And copy of the Angling Times.
That's right. That's funny, Dave. Yeah, we have, completely. No, but let me close out the thought here, and then I'll hand it over to my esteemed colleague to take us into the return of the gold standard. Now, from this extract, the London Times, the hazard circular I just shared with you, that calls for the destruction of the United States, because if you don't do it, it will destroy every monarchy on the globe. Now, from that extract, it's plain to see that it is the advantage provided by the adopting of this policy, which poses a threat to those not using it, right? So if you had a currency which was debt-free, everybody else would be suffering. Now, 1863, nearly there. Lincoln needed just a bit more money to win the war, and seeing him in his vulnerable state, and knowing that the president could not get the congressional authority to issue more greenbacks, the money changers proposed the passing of the National Bank Act. The act went through. From this point on, the entire U.S. money supply would be created out of debt by bankers buying U.S. government bonds and issuing them from reserves for banknotes, just like I so inelegantly pointed out to you. The greenbacks continued to be in circulation until 1994. Their numbers were not increased, but in fact decreased. In numerous years following the war, the federal government ran a heavy surplus. It could not, however, pay off its debt. retired securities, because to do so meant there would be no bonds to back the national banknotes. To pay off the debt was to destroy the money supply. And that's not me saying, that's John Kenneth Galbraith. To pay off the debt was, see, this is the point I was trying to make earlier, Dave, right? If you pay off the debt, the money supply would be destroyed. I mean, to wrap your head around that is really hard, I get it, but that's the truth, okay? The American economy has been based on government debt since 1864, and other economies in the world followed suit. And it is locked into the system, full stop. Talk of paying off the debt without first reforming the banking system is just talk, and it's completely impossible. You can't actually pay off the debt. You cannot pay it off, full stop. That same year, Lincoln had a pleasant surprise. Turns out the Tsar of Russia, Alexander II, was well aware of the money changers scam. The Tsar was refusing to allow them to set up a central bank in Russia. If Lincoln could limit the power of the money changers and win the war, the bankers would not be able to split America and hand it back to Britain and France as planned. The Tsar knew that this handing back would come at a great cost, which would eventually need to be paid back by attacking Russia. I mean, they're talking about France and Britain attacking Russia. It being clearly in the money changers' sights. The Tsar declared that if France or Britain gave help to the South, Russia would consider this an act of war. Now, the South of the United States he's talking about here. Britain and France would instead wait in vain to have the wealth of the colonies returned to them, and while they waited, Lincoln won the Civil War. So Russia, believe it or not, intervened on behalf of Lincoln and stopped France and Britain from supporting the South. All right? Little known facts that we don't talk about anymore. Russia is bad. With an election coming up the next year, Lincoln himself would wait for renewed public support before reversing the National Bank Act he had been pressured into approving during the war. Lincoln's opposition to the central bank's financial control and the proposed return to the gold standard, they're both well documented. He would certainly have killed off the National Bank's monopoly had he not been killed himself only 41 days after being re-elected. The money changers were pressing for a gold standard because gold was scarce and easier to have a monopoly over. Much of this was already waiting in their hands, and each gold merchant was well aware that what they really had could be easily made to seem like much, much more. Silver would only widen the field and lower the share, so they pressed for
the return of the gold standard. 1866, 1881. Mickey, just before I commence, I wanted to say that the US national debt, which is $28 trillion and rising, which is equivalent to a national debt per capita of $85,747. That's per person. That's on top of the personal debt. That's just a national debt per person. It's nuts. And so, is there any fear, Mickey, do you think, that America could pay its debt off?
Oh, there's no fear. That never happened.
It could never happen. The amount is so damned large that it's impossible now to pay off. So the only way to secure the idea that to quell the fear that the debt could get paid off is just by lending out so much that you can never pay it back.
Yes.
And right now it is in such a quantity that it can never be achieved. So Australia is in the same boat as well these days. We're looking at 50 years, and that's if we've got a great economic climate for 50 further years. Good luck with that. Yeah. Climate crisis, debt crisis, corona crisis. Who knows? Who cares now? I don't really care anymore. Okay, so right after the Civil War, there was considerable talk about reviving Lincoln's brief experiment with the constitutional monetary system. Had not the European Money Trust intervened, it would have no doubt become an established institution. That was 𝐫𝐞𝐯𝐥𝐻𝐿 said that. After even his death, the idea that America might print its own debt-free money set off warning bells throughout the entire European banking community. On April 12th in 1866, the American Congress passed the Sorry, that's very funny, Freudian slip. Contraction Act, allowing the Treasury to call in and retire some of Lincoln's greenbacks. With only the banks standing to gain from it, it's not hard to work out the source of the action, to give the American public the false impression that they would be better off under the gold standard. The money changers used the control they had to cause economic instability and panic the people. This was fairly easy to do by calling in existing loans and refusing to issue new ones, a tried and proven method of causing depression. They would then spread the word through the media they largely controlled that the lack of a single gold standard was the cause of the hardship which ensued, while all this time using the Contraction Act to lower the amount of money in circulation. It went from $1.8 billion in circulation in 1866, allowing $50.46 per person, to $1.3 billion in 1867, allowing $44 per person. You can see the numbers declining, to $0.6 billion in 1876, making only $14.6 per person, and down to $0.4 billion only 10 years later, leaving only $6.6 per person, and continually growing population. Most people believe the economists when they tell us that recessions and depressions are part of the natural flow. But in truth, the money supply is controlled by a small minority who have always done so and will continue to do so if we let them. By 1872, the American public was beginning to feel the squeeze. So the Bank of England, scheming in the back rooms, sent Ernest Seed, is that right?
Yep.
With lots of money to bribe Congress into demonetizing silver. That sounds like our YouTube account. Ernest drafted the legislation himself, which came into law with the passing of the Coinage Act. Gee, they were creative. They must have sat up all night thinking about that one. Effectively stopping the minting of silver that year. Here's what he said about his trip, obviously pleased with himself. I went to America in the winter of 1872 through 73, authorized to secure, if I could, the passage of a bill demonetizing silver. It was in the interest of those I represented, the governors of the Bank of England, to have it done. By 1873, gold coins were the only form of coin money. End quote. Ernest Seed, or as explained by Senator Daniel of Virginia, in 1872, silver being demonetized in Germany, England and Holland, a capital of £100,000 or 500,000 was raised. Ernest Seed was sent to this country with this fund as agent for foreign bond holders to effect the same object, that's demonetization of silver, end quote. Within 3 years, with 30% of the workforce unemployed, the American people began to hearken back to the days of silver-backed money and the greenbacks. The US Silver Commission was set up to study the problem and respond with telling history. In quoted here, the disaster of the Dark Ages was caused by decreasing money and falling prices. Without money, civilization could not have had a beginning, and with a diminishing supply, it must languish and, unless relieved, finally perish. At the Christian era, the metallic money of the Roman Empire amounted to 1.800 million. By the end of the 15th century, it had shrunk to less than 200 million. History records no such disastrous transactions as that from the Roman Empire to the Dark Ages. United States Silver Commission, while they obviously could see the problems being caused by the restricted money supply, this declaration did little to help the problem. In 1877, riots broke out all over the country. The bank's response was to do nothing except to campaign against the idea that greenbacks should be reissued. The American Bankers Association Secretary James Buell expressed the bankers' attitude well in a letter to fellow members of the association. He wrote, "It is advisable to all in your power to sustain such prominent daily and weekly newspapers, especially the agricultural and religious press, as will oppose the greenback issue of paper money, and that you will also withhold patronage from all applicants who are not willing to oppose the government issue of money." Wow. To repeal the act creating banknotes or to restore to circulation the government issue of money will be to provide the people with money and will therefore seriously affect our individual profits as bankers and lenders. See our congressman at once and engage him to support our interests that we may control legislation. Oh my lordy, Mackie, that is
so they don't say that anymore, right? So these statements were open, and the same with the earlier London Times article. Nobody, none of the parasites would talk like that anymore, and openly, certainly.
Oh no, this will be still back rooms, right? Back rooms now.
Completely.
Yeah,
but it's the thing. Sorry, keep going.
No, it's okay. We're almost done. So James Buell, American Bankers Association. What this statement exposes is the difference in mentality between your average person and a banker. With a banker, less really is more, and every need an opportunity to exploit. James Garfield became president in 1881 with a firm grasp of where the problem lay. And he said, "Whosoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce. And when you realize that the entire system is very easily controlled one way or another by a few powerful men at the top, you will not have to be told how periods of inflation and depression originate." That was James Garfield, 1881. Within weeks of releasing this statement, President Garfield was assassinated.
Yeah, there's a theme here.
Did I say, Mickey? I'm just going to repeat. I love the banks, and the system, the banking system. It's awesome. We're just reading some text out. Nothing to go on. Nothing to see here. Move along.
It means nothing. It's meaningless.
Yeah, my statement means nothing to them. I bet my brakes don't work again tomorrow.
They're burning down Catholic churches in Canada, just as a thing.
What, right now?
That's happening right now, right?
Is it?
Yes, four churches have been in total. So more churches burned down on Canadian Indigenous lands. In total, 4 Catholic churches have burned down in Western Canada over the past week, which has of course nothing to do with the dead children's graves they found.
Oh no, no, completely not. No.
Oh no, they just burned down.
A coincidence.
Yeah, so
you're staring at the numbers too long, Mickey. If you see a connection there, just going to say
the investigations. I was going to say the recording here. One of the fire.
Hundreds of children's graves.
Yeah, the investigations to the previous fires and these 2 new fires are ongoing with no arrests or charges. RCMP Sergeant Jason Bader said, "It comes as hundreds of unmarked graves have been discovered at sites of former residential schools in Canada." The government-funded compulsory schools were run by religious groups in the 19th and 20th centuries with the aim of assimilating Indigenous youth. So the Stoll generation wasn't just an Australian thing.
No, it was quite a thing at the time. It was the start of the time.
This has nothing to do, of course, with what we're discussing right now and the banking system at all, right? Just put it out there. Wanted to mention what happened.
Mickey, the fellow that is that the haphazard James Bond guy, the English comedian. He did Mr. Bean.
Oh,
Rowan Atkinson has a very funny stand-up skit where he's talking about a fatal beating which was administered to a child, and he calls the parents in, and the parents say, so what happened? Oh, one moment he's just flitting about like a kite, the next he's lying there dead. So what happened? Oh, I administered a beating in which he died. I see.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of brushed over.
Yeah, and that's that then. I see. So is he going to grow back then?
Yeah, my arms, they're going to grow back, right?
Yeah, but see, my grandfather, and sorry to diverge from the text here, but I'm just saying how people react to the news of having found hundreds and hundreds of graves of children,
mm-hmm.
and the reaction obviously is they're burning down these churches.
Yeah. I saw through what you were saying.
Discussing right here,
mm-hmm.
right? At all, right? But my grandfather told me some horrific stories. My grandfather was born in 1901, so he went to a grammar school. Came from a really wealthy family. They paid the school in gold coins, believe it or not.
Wow!
And it was a Catholic grammar school back in Germany back then, which is now Poland, but that's neither here nor there. And he told me of horrific beatings that. Especially the Polish children or ethnic Polish children were subjected to. The poorer, they're still playing with gold, but subjectively they were the poorer kids or the less advantaged. This was again back in those days. A lot of different ethnicities used to live in the same areas together. It's just how it was. The Poles and Germans, Silesians, etc., etc. And it was the children of I guess, or maybe the less intelligent children sometimes, be they German or Polish, that would be administered these beatings, and never the children that came from really influential or wealthy families, because they could fight back, right? And these beatings, I won't describe it on air because it is too horrific to repeat. And it turned my grandfather against the Catholic Church for life. He became a free thinker, and I guess he passed that on to me in many ways, because we spent many hours in my young adulthood talking about these things. But yeah, so it is horrific. It is horrific. But if people are finally rising up and saying, "Yep, this is no longer good," then I'm all for it. Which brings us to free silver.
But I got an announcement to make.
Okay.
Right this second, I've just received a news article from June 25th, and it says from 2 days, it goes, adults in El Salvador to get $30 in Bitcoin as nation unveils details to make crypto legal tender.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
I wonder what's going to happen to that person.
Well, we'll keep your eyes on El Salvador.
President Nayib Bukele, good luck with that, mate. Just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, get your kids to start your car, man.
Don't have a car. That's my advice. Do away with cars. Stay in your house until the end of time.
Yeah. Because you won't be making any public appearances after that. Watch this space. Watch this space.
I had heard moves of some countries going in that direction. This is amazing. All right. Very interesting. No, sorry. Thank you, Dave. That's very much in line.
It was on topic, mate.
But see, this completely. But this is exactly where this is we're gonna have the articles at the end of the show cycle, where we are looking at the conflict between the digital banking currencies and the cryptocurrencies, which is now clearly emerging as a problem for the banks. And I'm happy to help you, Mr. Bank, if you need my help. So, don't do anything to my car. Free silver, 1891 to 1912. What happened in that period? Fleecing of the flock is the term the money changers use for the process of booms and depressions, which make it possible for them to repossess property at a fraction of its worth. Okay? In 1891, a major fleece was being planned. Now, we don't have to look to 1891 at all. I mean, when we had these banking issues, and then we had the real estate crisis as well.
I remember those.
A billion people were dispossessed.
Mm-hmm.
The money is never lost. wealth doesn't disappear. So let's say you've got even bonds or shares. Like shares, you've got a share for a company. In today, it's worth $1, for argument's sake, right? Tomorrow, they tell you it's worth 10 cents. So you lost 90% of its value. Well, no, you haven't until you sell it, right? You hold on to the share, and it'll go up and down, and you might get the value back. You might get more than the value back. But what these people can do, people with money. And by the way, and I think I've told you the story before, I used to work for an Opel store, and quite a couple of wealthy people had, I guess, a share in the Opel store, right? And I was in the city. I was in George Street, just at the beginning of the Rocks there. It was called Opel Fields. And the owners of the bank called me to the office and said, "Oh, Mackie, can you please go to the bank and buy some shares?" No, not at all my job, because I was working in the store, right? Yeah, sure. So then they let me in on what they were doing. They were manipulating the share price of this particular stock. Now, they had enough money to do it for this one stock, right? Now, imagine people that with actual wealth, I mean, massively wealthy people, manipulating the whole share price, right? So this stuff does happen. And we saw a massive redistribution of wealth from middle America, or in the middle class in general, that Obama administered, to the wealthy, to the banking system. The billions, hundreds of billions of dollars were given to the banks because they're too big to fail, which is nonsense, by the way.
That's right.
And that was also the day that free market capitalism died, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, because you can't. I mean, in a free market capitalistic society, you need to let everything play out. Or if it's unregulated, then if it fails, it fails. And then something else will take its place. That's how free market capitalism works, or should work. And the money was given to these bankers to pay themselves, massive bonuses. And never was there a word uttered about repayment. But anyway, in 1891, a major fleece was being planned. On the 1st of September, 1894, we will not renew our loans under any consideration. This is a quote, by the way. On September 1st, we will demand our money. We will foreclose and become mortgagees in possession. We can take 2/3 of the farms west of the Mississippi and thousands of them east of the Mississippi as well at our own price. Then the farmers will become tenants as in England. And who said this? This was said at the 1891 American Bankers Association, as printed in the Congressional Record of April 29, 1913. Wow, what? Yeah. The continued gold standard made this possible. William Jennings Bryan was the Democratic candidate for president in 1896, campaigning to bring silver back as a money standard, free silver. And this is what he said. We will answer the demand for a gold standard by saying to them, you shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold. William Jennings Bryan. Of course. The money changers supported his position on the Republican side so long as he wanted the gold standard maintained. The factory bosses were somehow convinced to tell their workforce that business would close down if Bryan was elected, and everyone would lose their jobs. The Republicans won by a small margin. Bryan tried again in 1900 and in 1908, but he lost both times. He became Secretary of State under Wilson in 1912, but became disenchanted and resigned in 1915 under suspicious circumstances connected with the sinking of the Lusitania, which drove America into the First World War.
Yeah.
Everything is connected.
It's much better now.
Oh, yeah.
So J.P. Morgan and the crash of 1907. The cause of the crash of 1907, you might ask? Well, people will do strange things when in a panic, which we've pointed out in the previous hour. And this might explain why Morgan was authorized to print 200 million from nothing, which he then used to prop things up. Wouldn't that be great? I need to pay my mortgage this. I'm just going to print out some money.
Just print some money there.
What's
wrong with you?
Yeah.
There you go.
Come on, more. Do you want some? Because I'm printing, yeah. I don't print money. That's a counterfeiting thing, and I would never do that. But if it was legal tender, yeah, woo. Let's just do that. Imagine if all coins were just clay. I'm sitting on a lot of clay here. I could just make a ton of coins. You know, it's all good. And some of the troubled banks with less than 1% in reserve had no choice. It was to accept this solution or go under, even if they had worked out that their problems had been caused by the same people now offering the solution. There is not a lot they could have done about it. J.P. Morgan was hailed a hero. And Woodrow Wilson even said, all this trouble could have been averted if we appointed a committee of 6 or 7 men like J.P. Morgan to handle the affairs of the country.
Hey?
I know. I got really patriotic in the end there. But not everyone was fooled. Those not favourable to... Now this is a quote from Rep. Charles A. Lindbergh. So those not favourable to the money trust could be squeezed out of business, and the people frightened into demanding charges in the banking and currency laws which the money trust would frame. Apart from making a small number rich at the expense of the many, in this case the instability also served the second purpose of encouraging the people to believe that they would be better off living under a central bank and a gold standard. Desperate people have little time for logic.
Lincoln watches. In Washington, the statue of Lincoln sitting in his chair is facing a building called the Federal Reserve Headquarters. This institution would not be there if Lincoln's monetary policy had been adopted by the USA. It is not federal, and it has doubtful reserves. The name is an open deception designed to give this private bank the appearance that it is operating in the public's interest, when in fact it is run solely to gain private profit for its select stockholders. It came into being as the result of one of the slickest moves in financial history. On December 23rd, 1913, the House of Representatives had passed the Federal Reserve Act, but it was still having difficulty getting it out of the Senate. Most members of Congress had gone home for the holidays, but unfortunately the Senate had not adjourned 𝐫𝐶 without date. So they were technically still in session. There were only 3 members still present. On a unanimous consent voice vote, the 1913 Federal Reserve Act was passed. No objection was made, possibly because there was no one there to object. Charles Lindbergh would have objected. Now, this is what he had to say. The financial system has been turned over to the Federal Reserve Board. That board administers the finance system by authority of a purely profiteering group. The system is private, conducted for the sole purpose of obtaining the greatest possible profits from the use of other people's money. Charles Lindbergh. Louis T. McFadden would have also objected. We have in this country, and this is what he said, one of the most corrupt institutions the world has ever known. I refer to the Federal Reserve Board. This evil institution has impoverished the people of the United States and has practically bankrupted our government. It has done this through the corrupt practice of the moneyed vultures who control it. Barry Goldwater would have also objected. Now these are all members of the government, also of the houses here, right? Goldwater, McFadden, Lindbergh. Now this is what Senator Barry Goldwater had to say. Most Americans have no real understanding of the operation of the international moneylenders. The accounts of the Federal Reserve System have never been audited. It operates outside the control of Congress and manipulates the credit of the United States. Most Americans would object to the passing of the bill if they knew, but there were only 3 senators left, and they were, I guess, easily persuaded to vote that law, or that bill, I should say, or the act into law, right? It's just astounding. It's similar to what happened in Australia with our, I guess, home security or the home defense laws that were ordered in without anyone having read them. It's hilarious. The Federal Reserve is also the single largest creditor of the United States government, and they are also the people who decide how much the average person car payments are going to be, what the house payments are going to be, and whether they have a job or not. The 3 people who passed the Federal Reserve Act in 1913 knew exactly what they were doing when they set up this private bank, modeled on the Bank of England, and the fact that the Bank of England had been operating independently unopposed since 1694 must have given them a great deal of confidence.
Where there's war, there's money. War uses up more materials more quickly than most anything else on Earth. In war, expensive equipment doesn't wear out slowly, it gets blown up.
Right.
I know, right? It's a very live Mythbusters episode when you get to blow things up. It's interesting to note that during the 119-year period from the founding of the Bank of England to Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, England had been at war for 56 years, while the rest of the time preparing for it. In the process, the money changers had been getting rich. So, there it was. The newly formed Federal Reserve poised to produce any money the US government might need from thin air, with each dollar standing to make a healthy interest. 9 days after its formation, the Federal Reserve founders were wishing each other a happy new year. What good fortune might 1914 bring?
World War I, 1914 to
Woo!
1918. Now I think we can get through some of this.
Good luck. 3 minutes.
Yeah, a little bit.
4 minutes. Yep.
The Germans. Actually, you know what? Let's not. Let's start where there's war with there's money next week, and let's just have a quick chat about what we discussed here. Now, none of this is made up. I need to remind everyone. You can do your own research and find the quotes and find the historical context and connections. But there's a lot here that you don't learn about in school. Obviously, you don't learn about it in school, because if you did, then the parasites would shoot themselves in their own leg or foot or head, as it were, and the whole system would crumble. So education, which is going to be part of another show cycle here that we're going to examine a bit more closely as one of the pillars of control, we'll deal with, like I said, at some other time. But this year is such a ingenious and if you follow the steps of development, Dave, and you see how it all happened, you think, why didn't someone stop it somewhere? Why didn't these people think, hey, no, this is not right? Because at any point in the history or the evolution of this particular con, someone could have stood up and said no, and they did. Of course, when they were in danger of being successful, they were quickly eliminated. But going back even further, though, to when the first money lenders or goldsmiths or whatever were starting this whole money system, fractional reserve lending, like having gold reserves, but giving out more money than they actually held, someone should have come down on them like a ton of bricks, right? But they didn't. It didn't happen. Because people didn't understand. People didn't educate themselves. The best weapon you have is between your ears. Okay? Educate yourself. Understand what's going on. Become an educated, knowledgeable person that can have educated, knowledgeable discussions and can put forward a point. Right? Because you can't win this with violence. That ship has sailed. The system is so entrenched. Any violent revolution will fail. You need to win with your, and that's what Bitcoin could very well help us do here. Make no mistake. Okay, you need to be smarter than they are, because they think they're the smartest people in the room. And for the last 300 years, who would argue with that, Dave?
I'm not saying a word. What were you talking about? Again, I think I've forgotten already. Oh, those banksters, how good they are, right? Did I say banksters? Oh, they'd love that.
Gives them a roguish charm, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. I don't want them to get RSI when they're fiddling with the brakes on my car. Just saying, It really happened, people. Just saying. Yeah. Whoever it was they obviously set the work experience kid. Because I'm still here. It's an oldie but a goodie, that one. Tampering with the brakes. Yeah. I've seen it so often in so many movies. It's just a thing. Like, what are they still doing that? surely I would have been zapped by a simplifying ray, you know, it's like Joe Biden. But it's all right. It's all good. Who am I to complain about society, Mickey? You know what?
I know.
We're inside the box, and wasn't it allowed? Anything, all the discussions with inside the box were okay?
That's right.
As long as we're not talking about what's outside the box. You know, maybe they're just getting offended by the Parasitic name, the title. But, you know, at some point, wouldn't they be, you know, sipping Sancerre and discussing, oh, have you heard those people on the internet talking about us? Cheers! Right? Give me some more endangered species drinks.
Yes. Mix some condor into my bourbon.
Condor. Yeah. Look, there's the music. This is the end of the second hour, and we'll see you next week. This has been David Mickey Shiny sign out. Stay tuned for Jer Bear's awesome show called After Hours. I joined it last week. You can too. Take care. And stay aware.